Hey guys, welcome back. In my last video, I started to add a custom water loop to this Aurora R10. I added two 120 millimeter radiators instead of the AIO and the air cooler on the GPU. Temperatures were improved drastically. The problem is that when I had really high loads on the system for extended periods of time, the water would rise up to about 60 degrees centigrade, which is a bit high for my taste. Removing the top cover would lower the water temperatures to about 40 or 45 degrees, which is a lot better, but it's not a complete build if I can't use the computer fully assembled. So in this part 2, I plan to fix those problems with some ideas I have. If you haven't watched part 1, I'll leave a link in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Fast forward a few hours, and as you can see, I removed all the plastic panels from the chassis. I also removed all the components. As you can see, the case is quite small. Here in the bottom plate, I start cutting the hexagons it had here that I will be using as intakes for the radiator I'm replacing on the bottom of the chassis. I'm going to be placing this 240 millimeter radiator I had lying around from a previous build. As you can see, it fits almost perfectly. Seems that it was built for this purpose, but now I have to go ahead and cut the bottom of the chassis so I can place the fans for this radiator. As you can see, the bottom seems to have enough space open for the air intakes. So hopefully with this larger 240 millimeter radiator and one of the 120 millimeters I already had installed, the cooling will be a little bit better. Also because I'm going to be cutting all the bottom of the chassis, I'm going to be needing to place the SSDs somewhere else, and the only place I have left is on the top of the case. I already went ahead and cut out some of the plastic on the top of the cover. I didn't need to cut that out because the hard drive would fit in regardless, but it just makes it a lot easier to remove in case I want to swap it out. The original idea was to place the larger radiator on the top of the case, but because of the shape of the top cover, the front fan wouldn't fit inside, and having the 240 millimeter radiator with only one fan wouldn't work at all. Also, if I wanted to place it on the bottom, the hinges for the power supply would get in the way, so I just went ahead and made room for it on the bottom. But the optimal placement would be on the top because heat rises. I also want to cut out some of the metal on the front of the chassis so I would get a bit more cold air from the outside. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the cutting and meet you back here to see the results. So I'm finished with the cutting. I cut out a little bit more of the supports on the bottom plastic base, and the fans ended up being a little recessed, which is better because we have more room between them and the video card. I also went ahead and cut out just a part of the front of the chassis. I didn't want to cut more because the case was losing some of the structural integrity because of all the cutting on the bottom, but it seems that it will get enough air through the front of the case. Also, just drill a couple of holes for the fans, especially the one on the bottom, because the plastic bracket that it came originally with won't fit anymore because of the barbs and the tubing that will come out from the bottom radiator. So now I just need to go ahead and fix the bottom radiator to the plastic base. I'm probably just gonna screw it in from the bottom, and I can screw the fans from the top so it won't move around. So I'll go ahead and do that and start assembling everything back together again and see how it works. So I put everything back together. The loop has been running with water the whole night. You can still see a couple of tiny little air bubbles inside, but nothing major. Just a couple on the CPU block that you can still see. No leaks so far, so that's good. I also took the time to tidy up the tubing a bit. This allowed me to eliminate these 4 elbows from the loop. This should help with water flow and ultimately a bit better cooling, and the pump doesn't have to work as hard, so it would probably reduce noise a bit. The case was upright all night, and I just flipped it on the side to see if any more air bubbles come out, and I noticed that the temperature dropped. Right now it's at 32.1 degrees, but when it was upright it was going up to 33.5, and it just comes to show you how every little thing can affect the temperatures by a few degrees. Because the fans are off, you can actually feel the warmth of the water through the tubing, but once I turn them on, it should go down closer to ambient temperatures. To help with the video card not sagging, I added a couple of more of these L-shaped brackets. Not the prettiest solution, but it works, especially because the original bracket that came with the case won't fit this particular card because the water block is a lot thinner than the original air cooler, and it really needs it because the water block is really heavy. I only had 4 fans, so I had to remove one from the front of the case to place it on the bottom radiator. So I now have 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top, and 1 in the front of the case. My thinking is that we will be getting cold air from the bottom of the case. It will be passing through the radiator, so it will heat up immediately, and hopefully it escapes through the side panel, because the power supply comes down on the top, and because of the video card, most of the air won't be able to escape to the top of the case. This will bring cold air in through the front that will hit the memory modules and the heat sinks on the VRMs, and will escape through the top fan. Although we have a larger radiator on the bottom now, we still have the same problem where we have 3 intake fans and only 1 exhaust. Another idea would be to place another fan on the front bottom of the case as an intake and flip both fans on the radiator to exhaust air through the bottom of the case. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on with the current configuration, do some testing, and see how it goes. Oh, a quick note, I forgot to show you where I placed the SSD because I had to remove the drive cages on the bottom of the case. I just placed it there with some dual-sided tape, and it feels pretty secure. So with that out of the way, we can head on to the testing. So I ran the computer for a few hours under heavy loads. I did notice an improvement on temperatures. It went all the way up to 80 degrees, but the average was around 77, when before it could go all the way up to 84, and the average was between 80 and 82. So that's a bit of an improvement. The fans are going full speed, and all the testing was done with the cover on, so the computer was fully assembled. I did notice the water go up to around 50 degrees when before it went all the way up to 60, so that's a big improvement. Right now I removed the cover so the water temperature could go down. It's around 40 degrees now, so that's pretty good, but still I didn't feel a lot of the heat coming out of the case through the side panel, and that's something I need to improve because 50 degrees is still a bit hot for my taste. So I'm gonna be doing a little more modifications and I'll come back to the video. So basically I'm running into the same problem. Cold air comes through the bottom of the case but gets heated immediately because of the radiator. And the problem with this case is that it gets trapped inside because the graphics card and the power supply are in the way, and it doesn't allow the air to go all the way up to the exhaust. This doesn't allow the radiator to do its job properly, so the water temperature goes up considerably. So to help with this, I added a second fan in the front of the case as an exhaust. This will hopefully allow me to remove some of that hot air that gets trapped inside of the case. I also added a fan to the side panel. This is a thin fan that originally was placed between the plastic and the metal plate of the chassis, but it was a little forced, so it started to bend the side panel a bit and it didn't fit properly. So I went ahead and cut out the square shape of the fan. As you can see, the fan fits properly in the back of the panel, but as it goes to the front, it starts to be a little thinner, so the fan peeks out a little bit. It's still a very tight fit. It hits the power supply once you put it inside the case, but the blades spin freely, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. The plastic panel is held in place by these plastic tabs here, so if you want to remove it, you just push it down and it releases. It's very easy. I also, after cutting the hole for the fan, I added this screw to the bottom to hold it in place so it won't be moving around and vibrating, which would make a lot of noise. I also cut a bit of plastic in the inside of the panel to accommodate the power cable, and I added a few splitters to the case because this motherboard only has 4 fan headers and now has 6 fans inside the case. The Noctua fans draw a lot less current than the original fans that came with the case, so there's no danger of overloading the headers. Now we have 3 input fans and we have 1, 2, and 3 exhaust fans, so this should work a bit better. I also went ahead and added this rubber feet. This will allow the case to be about a ½ an inch off the desk, so it should help with a bit more cold air coming through the bottom of the case. I just added a bit of dual-sided tape to them because I didn't want to screw them on, but they feel pretty sturdy. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this up, do some testing, and come back to the video to show you the results. So after some testing, I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm gonna put up some charts so you can see the comparison. First, we have the chart comparing the PC as it was on the first part of this video with 2 120mm radiators versus now that I have a 120 and a 240mm radiators installed. As you can see, the temperatures did drop about 5 degrees on the GPU and up to 12 degrees on the memory. The hotspot doesn't seem to get much colder, but still about 4 degrees on most of the games. So that's a pretty good result. And now with the fully assembled case, water temperatures are around 40 degrees centigrade most of the time. They go up to 45, but just for short periods of time. So the results are pretty good. In the second chart, you can see the difference between the original configuration, which had an AIO and an air-cooled GPU, versus the current configuration. As you can see here, the GPU temperatures dropped between 20 and 30 degrees, and the memory temperatures dropped about 40 degrees, which is a huge difference. Aside from that, this is a lot quieter than the original configuration, and an added benefit is because the GPU is not throttling anymore. You get better frame rates on games. So overall, we have better performance on the system. Knowing what I know now, I would probably go with 45 millimeter thick radiators, but as is, I'm pretty happy with the results. You can do this mod on any Aurora R9 up to the R12. The R13 has a different case that seems to be a bit easier to work with and add your own custom cooling solutions. So I hope you enjoyed this video, that it gave you some ideas on how to mod your case, and hope to see you in a future video. Thank you for watching and stay safe out there.